Well, hey, online campus, this is Joe, one of our teaching pastors here at Rainier View. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so glad you're here with us. Let me just catch you up real quick. A month ago, we launched the beginning of a 2-year generosity initiative called All In. Now, before you log off to go watch LeBron's path to ring number 5, just hold on one second. There's just 2 things I want to say. First, for us at Rainier View, we believe that Jesus is king over our entire lives, and that means every aspect of it, including how we think about and utilize our finances, needs to be handed over to him and transformed by him. This initiative is first and foremost about discipleship, about following Jesus and learning how to be all in for a God who withheld nothing from us, including his own life. And second, because of our conviction that generosity is all about following and becoming more like Jesus, we spent our time together studying what the Bible has to say about allowing him to shape the way we serve, pray, relate to others, worship, and give. We've invited people to join community groups to extend and personalize the conversation on what it looks like for them to be all in. And just this past Sunday, we've had our leaders of our church, including the pastoral team, go first in embodying God's generosity by making a 2-year financial commitment. Our hope and prayer for you is that the initiative will challenge you to consider what it means to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And our prayer for Rainier View is that God would use this turning point in the 68th year of the church to collectively teach us, shape us, and only then resource us and equip us to continue the mission of loving our neighbors. If you want to learn more about this All-In initiative, please check out allinrvcc.com. But don't open that just yet. Don't pull up that new tab, because first we're going to spend some time together this morning in the Gospel of Mark, which in my personal opinion, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm most likely right, Mark is the LeBron of the Gospels, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. You can argue for Matthew Jordan, you can insist on John Bryant, or you can have a hot take like Luke Doncic, but all equally valid points except maybe Luke, but Mark is by far the most masterful writer, and if you want the uncut 16-hour version of why I love Mark so much, it won't be in this sermon. I'll spare you of that, but just let me know. We'll have that session. But today, I'll spare you, and we're just going to focus on Mark chapter 8. And this chapter marks a turning point in the Gospel's narrative. See, up to this point, we've seen Jesus pull off the impossible time and time again. If we were to make an Instagram reel to highlight what's been happening, here's what you would see in that video. It would include Jesus healing a paralyzed man, Jesus calming a storm with nothing but his words, Jesus performing an exorcism of a legion of demons, Jesus restoring a hemorrhaging woman and raising a dead girl, Jesus walking on water, and the list goes on and on. So it's no wonder that word started going around about Jesus. And people began wondering who this guy was, and all sorts of theories were being tossed out there. Some thought Jesus was a prophet who carried the mantle of John the Baptist. Others thought Jesus was Elijah, who has returned after being carried off into heaven. See 2 Kings 2 for reference. And some folks on Reddit proposed that Jesus was a Time Lord, which is the worst theory of all time because Jesus doesn't have a British accent. Of course, he's not one. But then one of the disciples by the name of Peter guesses correctly that Jesus is the Messiah. And when Jesus confirms that he is the chosen one, the disciples all collectively lose their minds, because what you have to remember about first century Jerusalem was that it was kind of like New York City in 1776. To quote the famous historian Lin-Manuel Miranda, there were people shouting in the square, new ideas in the air, look around, the revolution's happening where? Well, in this time in Jerusalem, in J-Town. And the Jews were ready for revolution. They were tired of paying Emperor Tiberius' bill. They were tired of being oppressed by the tax collectors and soldiers and being harassed. And they were tired of waiting on God to answer their prayers, to send someone to save them from Rome. They waited over 500 years for God's chosen one, the Messiah, to show up and destroy their enemies. So when Jesus confirms and says he is the Messiah, the disciples can't help but to hear the revolution is on. But then Jesus lays out a game plan that confuses and quite honestly disturbs his disciples. He shares that the Messiah is not going to destroy Israel's enemies, nope, but that he's going to be rejected, suffer. He's going to die and somehow be raised back to life. And in doing so, he's going to overcome sin and evil, not through violence, but through forgiveness, sacrifice, and love. And so the disciples aren't sure what to say about this. And in fact, some of them are probably thinking Jesus' plan is ridiculous, childish, and quite honestly foolish. So I'm pretty sure that Peter speaks for all of them when he jumps at the opportunity to correct Jesus. He basically says this to Jesus, hey, Jesus, here, hey, have a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. We need you to be a warrior and not a servant, and you are really killing the mood right now. And so Jesus turns to Peter and he kindly says this to him. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then he called the crowd to him along with the disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes to his Father's glory with the holy angels. It might be confusing to hear Jesus call Peter the devil. But what's missing in translation is that the name Satan comes from the Hebrew verb, well, guess what? Satan, which means to obstruct or to oppose someone. For example, I'm driving on the 5 and I'm surrounded by a bunch of Satans making a 30-minute drive a 2-hour ordeal. Or as it relates to Mark 8, I want to pursue a life God intends. But this person, place, or thing is Sataning my way. Jesus is saying to Peter, stop opposing me. Stop interfering with what I came to do. Stop being a Satan, because what you want is a God who will fit your agenda, but what you need is a God who will reset your priorities. You see, Peter and the disciples were under the impression that their hopes and dreams aligned so perfectly with Jesus' way that they could live a life committed to Jesus without letting go of their own expectations for what the Messiah should do. Plus the establishment of an independent Jewish kingdom, plus some nice rewards and benefits for being the first to like and subscribe to Jesus. And to this, Jesus says, no. If you're going to follow me, you need to apernomai yourself. That is, you need to relegate yourself. You need to displace yourself. Jesus isn't saying you don't matter, but what he is saying to the disciples is this. On the list of priorities, your ways need to become secondary to my ways. And Jesus describes this way as picking up a cross and following him. Under the Roman Empire, death by crucifixion was a penalty reserved for the worst of criminals, and it was common as a part of this punishment to require the person who was condemned to carry their own cross to the location of their execution. Now, there's a lot of guesstimates on how heavy the cross would have been, but the lowest estimate I saw was around 75 to 125 pounds. So unless you're The Rock or Trevor Hansen, carrying your cross requires 2 hands. Let me show you with the magic of technology by jump cutting over to a cross. Well, welcome to Illustrations with Joe 2.0. Last time I didn't kill myself. This time, well, we'll see about that, right? Won't we now? So about cross carrying, right? The thing about a cross is, now obviously this isn't a Roman cross here, but it's the one that I can most likely carry. So this is the one we picked. If Trevor was doing this illustration, again, we'd use the one way up there that's a lot heavier. But this one is perfect for me. So when Jesus calls us to apernomai ourselves, to relegate ourselves, to pick up the cross and to follow him, for most people, for all people, that's going to require 2 hands. And then Jesus is going to say, go this way, and we're going to go, right? And then he might be like, no, this way instead, and we're going to go. And see, I mean, it's not easy, because I'm already breathing heavy, but it's something that we can do when both hands are free, when we are open to the way that Jesus is calling us. But however, life can be a little more complicated than that, because we have these things called priorities. And it's really hard to start thinking about these priorities in relationship to the cross. Let me explain. You see all these balloons here. These balloons here represent priorities. So let's say if you're married like me, your wife or your husband better be a priority, right? So this is a priority. And then Jesus is still saying, pick up your cross and follow me. So it's like, okay, well, I can hold on to this. And well, we can still go. We're still going. Slowly but surely, we're still going. Except in life, what you come to find is that usually, if you're an adult, you have more than one priority. If you are lucky and blessed, you may also have kids. And if you so choose, you may also have a career to manage. And you know what? Also, maybe you have extended family members and friends and all those relationships you need to keep together. And also there's this huge thing called money and finances that you kind of need to keep up. And we got some dreams and goals we want to take care of, right? And so if we're going to try to hold on to all of these and try to keep them afloat and also pick up our cross and keep going, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll show you what will happen. We throw them all up, try to keep them up in the air, and we're carrying, but then we're going to have to drop it to bounce one up, and then that one's down, so we're going to throw that up. The money's gone, so we need to throw up the money up. And then, look, our dreams and goals are abandoned, so we need to throw the dreams up. And all of a sudden, if you add more and more balloons and you're trying to keep them afloat, eventually, what ends up happening is you just leave the cross where it is, and Jesus becomes something you just pick up when you can pick it up. And when you can't pick it up, you leave Jesus behind to go attend to something else. Now, if you notice that the spouse balloon is furthest away and the money balloon is closer to me, that's by accident. So let me go ahead and go grab everyone back into the realm of things. So obviously, you can keep 1 or 2 of these balloons afloat, but you can't keep them all afloat while still carrying the cross. So what do we do? What does that mean? What does the Christian life look like? Is Jesus saying our spouse doesn't matter? Is Jesus saying our career doesn't matter? Is Jesus saying our dreams and goals don't matter? It's when he says relegate yourself, relegate yourself. Is he saying give up all these things and just carry the cross? Well, no, I don't think so. I think Jesus still wants you to feed your kids. But what I do think Jesus is saying is this. He's saying all of these priorities you got here need to become secondary to the cross. It's not that they don't matter, it's just they have to be shaped by the cross. They have to be transformed by the cross. They have to be found within who Jesus is and what he calls us to be and what he calls us to do in our lives. So what that means is we need to take our priorities and we need to nail them to the cross. And then we'll stick that on there and nail that. And then obviously you can't forget your kids. And then, your career matters too. So let's go ahead and toss that one up there as well. So notice what happens here when a marriage is surrendered to Jesus, when your kids and how you parent and how you want to raise your family is surrendered to Jesus, when your career and what you hope to be in life is surrendered to Jesus. All of a sudden, when you pick up your cross to carry it and follow Jesus, all these things, all these priorities are kept afloat because you've already rooted them in who Jesus is and what his mission is and what Jesus' call is upon your life. A marriage that is surrendered to Jesus will be transformed by Jesus and given new life. Kids surrendered to Jesus will be transformed and given new life, a career, and so on and so forth. Now you might be thinking, does that mean everything I put to the cross, everything I give up to Jesus will be sustained and renewed? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, no, because here's the thing. Sometimes our expectations, the way we prioritize things, the way we think about them, when we nail them to the cross, it's very possible that it will die on the cross and Jesus will not raise it back to life, except it's floating right now, but it's dead now, right? Jesus won't raise those things back to life because maybe the relationship we really value isn't healthy, and Jesus needs to break our idea of what a healthy relationship is in order to give us a healthy relationship. Maybe the way we've thought about our career hasn't been sustainable, and Jesus is saying, no, I got to kill that way, and I can't raise it back to life. Maybe in this season as a church, the ways we thought about generosity and the ways we've practiced generosity, Jesus is saying, no, that's not the way. And so if you're going to nail it to the cross, it's got to stay dead. I can't raise it back up. Because there's something better for you, there's a better way for you. When Jesus says, give up your ways and take up your cross, again, he's not saying give up everything. But what he is saying is, center it on me and let me decide if it is raised from the dead or if it has to stay buried. And by the grace of God and the power of technology, we are back. But here's the deal. If you want your relationships sustained by Jesus, if you want your career shaped by Jesus, if you want to practice a generosity that is God-like and God-sized, if you want to follow Jesus in all things, it requires surrender. It requires us having both hands open and free. It requires us to apernomai ourselves, to give over our priorities to Jesus and then to let him decide what remains, what is transformed, and what needs to stay dead. Jesus calls for our all-in surrender, not because he wants us to be miserable, but because he loves us and because he wants what's best for us. And sometimes it is for our good that Jesus says, let go of your way because I have a better way for you. So what do you need to let go of today? What is Sataning you from being all that God calls you to be? What are those priorities that take you away from the cross and the path that Jesus calls you to? Don't let these be hypothetical questions, but instead, I want to encourage you this week to take time to name any area of your life, any areas, any sections, any aspects that are not surrendered to Jesus. And I can promise you this, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to want to leave some things out, and I can guarantee you're going to get upset with Jesus and maybe with the church and maybe even with yourself. It's not easy to surrender every part of our lives, and I'm right there with you in sometimes wanting and wishing that Jesus was only our friend, our teammate, but not our Lord. Because there are things in my life I want to hold back. There are areas in my life I don't want Jesus to be a part of because we have our own agenda to get done. We have student debt to pay. We have medical procedures to figure out. We want to own a house by 40, maybe adopt a kid or two, maybe retire by 50. And if none of that can happen, at least buy a PlayStation 5. We aren't asking for much. But I can also guarantee that neither you nor I can truly be all in for Jesus until we surrender our priorities to him. It's not easy, again, to be all in for Jesus, but the surrender and sacrifice it takes is worth it. Because the agenda for life that Jesus offers to us is so much better than anything we can come up with ourselves. Our own efforts have resulted in what? Being more stressed, more anxious, more sick, more angry, more violent, more divisive. And so the question is, today, are we tired of doing things our way? And are we willing to trust in Jesus' way, the way of the cross, and that his way alone is what is best for us when it comes to our families, our vocations, our resources, our hopes, and our dreams? I pray that we get to a place where we say, not our way, but your way be done, Lord.
So I'm Eric Anderson, and this is my wife Amber, and this is our son,
Grayson.
And
Zoe.
I have been going to RVCC for the last 15 years when me and Amber started dating. 16.
I have been going here since I was born.
Our youngest son was a baby, 9 months old, and he's 55 now, so a long time. of all time.
Hi, I'm Terry Mars, and I've been going to RVCC since I was in high school, and so 1980s. And that's Scott and I met actually at church in youth group.
I'm Scott, and my sister and I were invited by a neighborhood girl, Teresa Claiborne was her name, and I was 5 or 6. Sheila must have been 3 or 4, and we went to church, and everybody else kind of
The
got
parents
pulled in,
didn't
and
go.
and so that was a real great experience to be able to do that, and then see all the generations kind of be part of things, and always be all active as well. So that's been special.
Making RVC a good investment into our community is not only the more that we can pour into the church to benefit our family, it also benefits the community.
You know, the church is our focal point now, and they have reached out to us in every situation possibly. And I really feel that the way the church is planning on going is the right way to go. I can see it opening up more and more doors, because our focus now is our neighborhoods, and not just blind knocking on doors, but getting to know our neighbors.
There's so many hurting and lost people out there, and close all around both of our campuses, and just the more that we can give of our time and our resources and our finances to help other people's lives be better, it blesses us as well. You know, kind of, we saw that like going to Peru and Chile, like they don't have hardly anything, and yet they give you the last shirt off their back. You know, they're just such gracious, loving people.
And they have so little, and that really changed my life as far as what's really important, as far as do I need all these different things.
One other thing I was thinking of, just as far as investing in RVCC, is I've just really appreciated how many things that the church is involved in the community, in the schools. So, you know, maybe we don't have as much time to give in a different way, but if we can really make it a priority to give financially, then we can see that money go so far in our community. And, you know, maybe there's a family, their kid comes home with a warm coat, and they know that it came from us, and maybe that would plant the seed for them to want to come to one of our services. And you just think about those little things and those little seeds that are planted, and we might not get to see it grow, but those little things can make a difference in someone's life, which is really special.
You think these big amounts and you can't do it, and then you realize God provides ways, things that you can sell that you did not know about. On this time, I was thinking, you know, what do we have left to sell? Well, old stuff that you guys don't want. But then we went to see our money guy, and he had found something in a small insurance thingy that I had, that all of a sudden, starting this year, I'm going to get an extra $3,000. Now, is that testing God? I hope not. I kind of laughed and told him that, you know, you're going to have to come through. And there it is. So, anyway, it's a blessing. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I have a memory of when we did the addition at Parkland for the kids building. They sent all the kids home with these cardboard houses or cardboard churches with a slot. And at that point, I think we were getting $20 a month for allowance. And so we'd get our allowance, and then my $2 would go into that cardboard box. And I don't remember what the campaign was called, but I still have that memory. And so how cool that, you know, Gigi's taught, you know, Dad how to tithe, and then I remember that as a child, just already learning how to tithe when I was getting $20 a month for allowance. Is really important to us as our kids are getting older and learning how to count money, and we're starting to talk about doing an allowance for chores, just how we'll teach them to give their 10% to God first, because it's not our money, it's God's money. So.
What do you think generosity means?
Giving to others.
How does it make you feel when you give to someone?
Happy.